Everyone, it's Sean again. I'm back here in the hangar in Petaluma. I'm going to do a follow-up video on the GWS. There were some questions about sensor placement. So while it's here for the annual and it's in a partially disassembled state, we'll go through some of this stuff. So first of all, for the rotor tack sensor, get the camera up there. I'm using the auto gyro sensor, and I made a Y connector here to split the signal between the avionics unit and the GWS. So if you're wondering why, I have two long cables strung all the way up to that sensor rather than splicing the cable as it came through the cockpit here, is because I had a secondary sensor. There was some discussion with with the smart avionics rather, that the counting the same holes that the auto gyro sensor is counting wasn't going to provide a signal of sufficient frequency for the GWS to perform its heuristics. So it was suggested that I have a secondary sensor mounted to count the teeth. I had no end of trouble trying to make that work reliably. So in the end, I opted to splice the auto gyro sensor to see if it would work, and it worked. It works good. It works satisfactorily. So I'm happy with that setup. But if you're going to do this in your gyro, I would recommend that you splice the signal somewhere where it comes into the cockpit, so you don't have these really long cable lengths. In terms of throttle sense position, you have two options. You can run the engine. You can run a signal from the engine tack, or you can have a throttle mounted switch. Now I opted for the throttle mounted switch because trying to get the signal wire from the engine was, after post construction, is kind of a difficult process. So I have this switch mounted right here, which will open when the throttle reaches about 3,500 RPM. I have a little mark here that tells me where that position is on the throttle, and then the switch will open up at that point, and it's closed all other times. Also, regarding the wiring of this Y connector, so one branch is 12-volt power, ground, and signal, and the other branch is signal and ground only. So something to keep in mind if you're going to wire a cable like this as well. Even if both signals come from the same 12-volt bus, you should only use one for power. You shouldn't power it from both lines. So the OAT sensor for the GWS is mounted here. That's that electrical eyelet looking connector. That's actually the OAT sensor for the GWS, and that's mounted on the rear duct. Just going to back the camera off, just kind of get a perspective of where that's located. Right here by the antenna. Pretty easy spot for it. Okay, so there was some question about the stick position, switch placement. So we mounted that stick position micro switch on the instructor stick, rear of the pilot seat. There's two micro switches here. This one on the back, that is the senses the stick in the fully forward position. It's effectively the pre-rotator interlock. So for the one for the GWS, for the stick fully back, there's this micro switch mounted here on the front, and so we bolted an L bracket here, drilled a couple of holes, and then mounted the micro switch there. So I also wired in a switch for the GWS, and the reason for doing this is, not because I ever want to fly without it being turned on, but I found that sometimes, during cold mornings, or if I haven't started the engine for a while, it'll take multiple cranks to get the motor actually started. And so you can't just go from start to on to start again. You must go turn the ignition switch completely to the off position, which unpowers the entire electrical system. Now, I am not a fan of the rapid power cycling of electronic devices, so I like to get the engine started and get the electrical system completely stabilized, and then I will turn on the GWS. And so that's the reason I put this switch in.